you don't have to be ready to exit your business right now to
Mm.
start thinking about these activities, right? So exit planning is just good business planning.
Hey, y'all, and welcome back to the Real Money Talk. This is where we talk about how real people are making real money, and you can too. So, as you guys know, my favorite segment of this entire show is when we get to do a Member of the Month spotlight. This month, I am joined by Cheryl Heller. She is founder of Pillar One Consulting. She provides CFO and strategic advisory services to help small businesses and startups actually understand and take control of their finances. She's also a partner in a private equity firm and an active real estate investor. She's done short-term to mid-term rentals. So she's not just advising a business, she's building it herself. So it's one of those things we always talk about. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Cheryl is in those trenches. What I really appreciate about her is her approach to how she removes the intimidation around money. I know so many business owners are good at their craft and good at what they do, but they really get disenchanted with all the financial mumbo jumbo going on in the background. So Cheryl really helps business owners go from confusion and avoidance to clarity and confidence. She's got real actionable financial strategies. So Cheryl, I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to chat. As you know, we can get going on lots of stuff.
Oh,
Later
yes, for
on.
plenty of time. So yeah, we might have to edit this one to get the time down. But yes, let's bring it down. So I want to focus on you first. So give us a little bit about your background, how you originally got into finance, and how did your introduction into the finance world evolve into what is now Pillar One Consulting?
Yeah, so I guess I was always good at math. I always really liked math. And so just kind of when I went to school, I figured I would do something with math and business. And so, finance and accounting just seemed to flow really nicely. And so when I graduated from school, I did some internal audit, I did some public accounting. And then really enjoyed sort of working with the clients, working with the business owners to understand their business and help them make their decisions and grow their business. So
Mm,
ended up going in-house and spent 20 years in large financial services companies, and saw a lot. And it was kind of a fun ride for that time. And
mhm.
then got to a point where I wanted to really, help other businesses grow. And so
Yeah.
for about the past like 8 years or so, I've been consulting with small businesses and startups, really enjoying sort of seeing the work that we're doing come to fruition through the business's success. And so that's where I spend my time these days. Personally, I enjoy my Peloton. And I try and get in a few workouts every week. And then I have a husband and a daughter who's on her own. She's almost 25 years old. So she
Flies by.
is, carving her own way. And we have two rescue dogs. So I spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah, they are precious little creatures, y'all. They're always there too. We were actually just talking about Louise in the background. So she's with us currently. If you can't see her, she's still there. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing. That's really helpful. And I love that you have the corporate background, right, from the big high level perspective, and you're able to take that experience from a corporate side and what you've learned with these, you know, high level type companies to actually bring it down to the brass tacks of these small business owners and startups. So, when you were working in the corporate finance space and even on your private equity side and with the entrepreneurship of your own business, what do you see or what did you see that was missing for small business owners that you knew you could help step in and fulfill?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think, small business owners start with an idea and they want to bring that product or service to the market. They're not thinking about repeatable, scalable processes or
No, they are
efficiency
not.
in their business, right? And so, really, like allowing them to do their thing, right? And be who they are and bring their brilliance to the market. But then taking the background that I have in spending many years making sure that we had the right systems and processes in place, that we had good sort of project management infrastructure, that we were doing good risk management and evaluating, how we can get done what we want to get done and
Mm.
managing our risk on the back end. Bringing that perspective to these small business owners, I think helps them to really, focus on their business, focus on their clients, focus on their product, and really spending the time where they should be spending the time. So, you don't want them in the background, like putting their procedures together, right? They need to be out bringing their brilliance to the world.
Absolutely. And I think of, I always relate it to different experiences and people, like actual people that I've interacted with in life. And I have a friend of ours, a couple friend of ours, and they were in our wedding, loved them dearly. They were building a house several years back, and the wife has the most impeccable taste, like the way that she sees things and designs. I mean, and their house is, spoiler alert, it's done now, but it's gorgeous and it's just so well designed, the color schemes and all of that. Well, on the other end of that spectrum, her husband is a master plumber, craftsman, just really good with his hands, but he is incredibly particular about the structure. And so the size of the plumbing pipe and all of I don't know anything about construction, but he does. And so he was like really in the nitty gritty. So when they were building their house, it was such a funny dynamic to see him be so focused on the actual infrastructure and the bones of the house, right? The size of the two, not two by fours, but size of the framing and size of the pipes and all of the different meticulous details that are really important to a house, but you don't really see it. He was digging into that. She stepped in with her genius of designing it and making it beautiful and making it something that people could enjoy. And that's what I think of for you and what you offer. These business owners have a product or a service that they can show and make beautiful and make wonderful that people want to see and want to be a part of, but they may not know, like, oh, what size pipe goes here or what type of copper or, right, all the other meticulous details in the background.
But little things add up, don't they?
So putting those two together is explosive. And that sounds like what you're doing for these business owners is helping them deal with all the meticulous nitty-gritty details of their financial picture so that they can continue to grow and scale their creative, beautiful service, product, business, all of those things.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and the other thing, and listening to you talk through that example kind of brought this up, is really making sure that they're staying focused on what they say their goal is, right? Because,
Mm,
like, so your friends, like, their goal was to get a house built, right? But if you keep making shifts here and there and, changing your mind and doing shiny object syndrome, I like to call it, you're never going to get your house built, right?
mm,
And so part of what I'm doing with my clients is saying, okay, so we set goals for the year, and what you want to do now may or may not achieve that goal. So help me understand the why behind what you're doing, like, and help me understand how that relates back to your goal. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, it doesn't. We shouldn't actually do that. Let's not spend time on it. And
yep.
other times they'll say, well, yes, I know that was our goal, but here's what's happening in the market, and this is why we need to make this shift. And so, I always think having that explicit discussion,
Yep.
rather than just glossing over it, I think is so important, right? Like, I would rather see folks make a decision to do something different than not make a decision and end up in a place that they don't want to be.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Is if you're going to make that decision, you do it with intentionality, not because of the shiny object syndrome where you're like, oh, that's cool, let's go this way or that way. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, just the accountability to the business owner to stay on target. And if the target's moved, can we justify why? Like you said, has the market
Mhm.
shifted? Has something changed? So yeah, that's incredibly valuable because we all, I know you know me, my ADD kicks in and I'm over here and there. So I think that's really powerful for business owners because it's easy to get distracted. This is a world of distractions. So super powerful. Um, is there any like key moment that you kind of had that aha of, hey, these business owners are way more overwhelmed with finances than they should be? Is there something that you're just like, oh, this is a problem that needs to be solved?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I spent the first, 25 plus years of my career in large companies and, didn't really think of that whole aspect of it because there's just so many people around and everybody's doing these jobs that are very sort of narrowly focused.
Mm,
And so I started to work with small business owners and in particular startup founders, right? They're just trying to do everything all at once, and that like the understanding of the financials and how they need to set it up, and what's important and what's not important, is something that most people don't have the experience of. Right.
mm,
So just kind of getting in there and seeing, what I can do to help them figure out what's important and what's not, and what really needs to be focused on,
yeah.
is really is the thing that kind of made me make that shift.
It is a lot. And I think any business owners out there know, I mean, your sales, your marketing, your this, your that. It's like drinking from a friggin' fire hydrant. You're just kind of getting what you can so you can help contain that and, spoon feed them what they need and manage the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also too, like help them understand what's really not important. Right?
Mm.
Like, do you have to have a P&L that has 50 different line items? Well, no, not if you're not going to make any different decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like, so whenever they want to get like that granular with the financials, I'm always like, okay, so how is that going to impact your decision making? Like, is it really going to make you make a different decision, or does it not matter? And really
Mm.
focusing on that, because, especially in today's day and age, like the data overload, the information overload is just
Yes.
crazy. Like, and you could do analysis, for days. You can, I can write a fancy Excel spreadsheet just as much as the next guy.
Yeah, you can. Listen, I'm an
But
Excel nerd and Cheryl puts me to shame. Like, oh,
Ooh, spreadsheets. Yum, yum.
but a
I've
lot of
never
times you
seen
don't
spreadsheets
need
like
that.
this, y'all.
But you don't need that, right? Like in a lot of businesses, it's just not that complex, right? And
Yeah.
so trying to make sure that we're focusing on what really matters.
And that was going to be one of my questions is, when you're stepping into a situation, are there key mistakes that you see business owners making, especially early on?
Yeah, so I think part of it is just not understanding cash flow and how
Mm,
that impacts their business.
yeah.
And I talk about this a lot. Like, just because you're profitable doesn't mean you have cash flow. And so really understanding the difference between what your P&L says, or maybe what your tax return says,
Mm,
and how much cash is in the bank, and knowing what you need that cash for going forward. So, think of it, an easy example is if you are a real estate investor and you own a building and that building needs a new roof. That's not showing up on your P&L, but it sure is impacting your cash flow.
right.
And so, how do you make sure that you're managing both sides so that you have a full picture?
Oh, that's huge because I mean that's obviously an important part of the business or the property, but right, how do you balance that out with cash flow, what's showing on your P&L? That's
Mhm.
I love that analogy too with the roof and real estate. So why do you think so many people, one, this is a two-part question. So why do you think so many entrepreneurs avoid numbers when they clearly shouldn't? And if somebody is listening and they know that they're avoiding it, they feel overwhelmed by their finances, what incremental steps should they take today, right now, to start moving towards getting that taken care of? So why and what?
Yeah. So, based on kind of my interaction with a lot of folks, I think part of the why is that they're scared. They don't
Yeah.
know. They have this fear of, like, not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right? They might be able to look at their bank account, but then they're like, well, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to, can I hire this person? I don't know. I have money in my bank account today. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so what I say to do with it is just to start from where you are, right? Like, just look at what's in your bank account, start tracking your expenses, simple spreadsheet or a simple, software program that can help you understand where your money is going.
Mm,
And then once you get a few months of data under your belt, then you can start to do some analysis on it, right?
Okay.
Like you can't, unless you know the data is clean, you can't really do that going forward analysis. It's going to help you make decisions.
That makes
And
sense.
so focusing on getting really clean data to me is the first step.
I love that. And it's like any diagnostic process, right? Like you can't go into a doctor's office and say, "Hey, what should I do, doctor? What prescription can you write me?" The doctor's like, "What the heck are you talking about? I don't know
Mhm.
about what your symptoms are. I don't know your medical history. I don't know your allergy," right? Like figure out, get the data, make it
Yep.
clean, figure out what the problems are, and then you can pinpoint what needs to be addressed.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk kind of go a little bit more onto like the fractional CFO side of things. Because I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that. But one, can you give us a high level explanation of what you come in and offer as a fractional CFO? And when companies take advantage of that, that service and that offering, what actually changes in the trajectory of their business? What shifts do they see and what benefits do they start to see as a ripple effect of bringing a fractional CFO in?
Yeah. So let me explain it by talking about like the breadth of the finance roles that you could find in an organization, right? So the first thing that you think about a lot of times is a bookkeeper, right? I
Mm,
need somebody that's just gonna, manage my ins and outs, manage my payables, make sure my receivables are happening. Great. Then the other thing people often have or talk about is I need a CPA to do my taxes.
hmm.
Right. So the bookkeeper really is looking at what happened already. The CPA is looking at what happened even further down the road, but for the purpose of, making sure that your tax return is correct. And as a CFO, I'll come in and not only kind of bridge the gap between the two, but also help you think about what's going forward, right? So take the
Mm,
data that your bookkeeper is putting together. Because most bookkeepers and controllers, there's stellar bookkeepers and controllers out there, but most of them don't actually think about forward-looking information. So they're not doing forecasting.
there you
They
go.
may or may not be doing budgeting. And they're certainly not helping you make business decisions with that data. And so that's where a fractional CFO can come in. So work with the bookkeeper controller, work with your CPA, work with your leadership team, right? Whether that's the sales and marketing folks or your product or delivery person, but really help you understand how to take all that data and
Yeah.
how to make sure that you're hitting the goals that you want to hit, how to make decisions about is there a product that is not making money? And so therefore you need to sunset that product. Is
Mm,
there a person that you need to hire to help your business grow? Is there a capital improvement that you need to make? Where are you going to invest in your business? All of those questions will come out of the data that your bookkeeper provides, but a fractional CFO is really going to help you interpret that data and make that decision.
I love that. And so there was, and this just popped in my head because I've heard you speak a few different times, and I hope that I don't butcher this example. Maybe it'll make sense. There was a guy that you worked with. I think he had like a trucking company and he was planning on hiring somebody, but he didn't know if he could, and there was something coming down the pipeline. Does this story sound familiar at all?
I have not had a trucking company as a client,
Maybe
so
it
I'm trying
wasn't a
to place
trucking
that.
company, but there was a situation where you
Hmm.
actually stepped in and were able to say like, hey, oh, and maybe it was, oh, he had like a big order come in and you're like, no, you can't take that order. And if he had done it, like he didn't have enough receivables coming in to take care of it. And does any of this
Yeah.
sound familiar? I
Yeah.
know.
So I mean, it's a situation that happens, all the time when I'm working with clients, right? Is that and again, it comes back to cash flow too,
Mm,
right? Because
always
especially
with the
if
cash flow.
yeah. Especially if your business is an inventory heavy business, right?
Mm,
You have to buy the inventory and pay for it before you can sell your product to your customers. And so that's a cash flow gap right there. And you have to understand how to mitigate that, right? So
yeah.
maybe you do receivables financing or inventory financing to help get you over that hump, or maybe you just have enough momentum so that You have really good data, so you know exactly how much inventory to buy when, and you can continue that turnover in a way that it helps your cash flow. But then, if you're in that kind of a business where you've got this inventory turnover and you're constantly investing in inventory to grow your business, you might need to add another team member. And
Yeah.
how do you know when the right time to add that team member is?
That's a
And
huge question. People ask
yeah,
that all the time.
and are you sure you can fund that team member, right? When you bring somebody on your team and you're hiring them and it's a full-time role, you've got payroll to think about. You
Hmm.
can't just skip payroll because you're out of cash.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you have those structures in place, that can help you understand what it's going to take to bring that team member on board. If you're hiring like a salesperson, they're going to pay for themselves, right? If they do a good job, they're going to pay for themselves through the sales that they generate. They're getting commission. So you pay that, after you get paid by your client.
Yeah.
Um, but then if you are hiring an operational person, somebody who's not, revenue generating, that's a whole nother story too,
Yeah.
because you might need to expand your finance team, your operations team. But if they're not generating revenue, how do you justify spending that money there?
Right.
And so that's definitely a conversation that I have often with clients.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure there are several people listening, watching that are like, oh yeah, that's always the question, right? Like I know I need to grow or I'm hitting this threshold, right? Or I'm plateauing at this level, but I'm getting pulled in 100 different directions. So how can I scale a business if I don't know if I can hire? Can I hire? Should I hire? Right? Like that's a
Mhm.
million and one questions. So if you're having those and these bells are going off, I'm gonna include all Cheryl's contact info in the email, in the comments, all of the things. So this sounds like a great conversation to have with somebody who's hitting that plateau and ready to go to the next level.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what I guess let's kind of talk about that. So at what point does a business need these strategic financial guidance, right? Like you said, a lot of people go into business and they've got a bookkeeper and they might have somebody file their taxes, but are there any checkpoints or little flags that are going off that are saying, "Hey, it's time to start moving into a more strategic guidance role and bringing in a partner to help with that?"
Mhm. So I think there's a couple of situations, right? If you are in fundraising mode, right? I work with a lot of startups.
Mm,
So fundraising mode, you definitely need that strategic finance perspective. If you are going to try and get any sort of financing, right? Like you are, you need to, I don't know, get a loan to buy your building that your business is housed in or something like that. That's definitely a time where you could use some strategic finance help, because thinking through what are the implications of taking on debt, and how does that impact your cash flow, and how does that impact your business operations,
hmm
is super important. And then anytime you feel like you're on this precipice of the next level, so there are definitely these sort of ceilings that people hit into. Maybe it's 5 million to over 5 million and 10 million to over 10 million. As you grow your business, and you're getting to these places where you need to do something differently,
mm.
in order to get to that next level, then that's a time where I think that strategic finance, help is very important.
And I know that resonates with so many people. We feel that pain, like as entrepreneurs, like we want to do and continue to share our message, share our product or service or whatever, continue to change the world. But growing into that can be difficult. So from a fractional CFO perspective, just to kind of bring it back full circle, it's even on the hiring side, like you said, you might need to hire somebody for operations or, some sort of accounting division or whatever. The CFO side of things, so many people look at this and think, oh, well, a CFO, like that's a really smart person. They're incredibly strategic. Um, that sounds like it's something that's somebody that I can't afford to hire. The service that you're bringing in and what you have to offer is that you could do that on a literal fractional basis and
Mhm.
serve the clients based off of their current model. And then as they continue to grow, you can continue to grow your service and your partnership with them as their business continues to expand. So can you elaborate on, how you can come in as a fractional CFO, giving them the ability to afford that type of service and that type of strategic guidance, and then also have the ability to grow and expand with you over time.
Yeah, so a fractional CFO, like you said, is just what it sounds like, right? It's bringing somebody with that CFO mindset, that CFO level experience and perspective, but only paying for a fraction of their time, right? So if you're going to hire a CFO full time, yes, that's going to be expensive. Not only expensive salary, but then you have benefits and bonuses, and et cetera, et cetera, et
All
cetera.
the things.
Right. As a fractional CFO, I'm going to come in and typically I work on a retainer basis. So it's a set amount per month and it's, a few hours here and there or more if the business needs it. But it's not full time. And so we're really able to stay targeted on what is it that I'm focusing on to help
Mm,
the business grow. And how do I interact with the existing finance team as well as with the leadership of the organization? And I'm very sort of specific and defined around what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so there's probably things, in fact, I was just talking to somebody today who currently has a full-time CFO, and she's trying to, and that person is retiring, and she's trying to decide if she can do fractional CFO going forward or if she needs somebody full-time. And
oh,
so we were going through the list of things that their current CFO does and thinking, okay, well, this piece over here, maybe the controller can do that, or this piece over here, maybe somebody else on the team can do that. And really focusing in on what the fractional CFO can bring to bear, as opposed to like in a lot of small businesses where the CFO becomes the person that, does everything because the founder, CEO, et cetera, trusts them.
yeah.
They have access to all the data. And so they just end up being the person that everybody's like, oh, well, you can do it, right? But when you have a fractional CFO, you really are more mindful about that and making sure that that time that the fractional CFO is spending is really in that target of the fractional CFO expertise.
Yeah, you're concentrating on what your focus should be, right? We always talk about ZOG or zone of genius, right? So you're
Exactly.
making sure from this fractional perspective, there's only so much time that's allotted. So that time is going to be focused on those top KPIs, those things that are really going to move the needle that the business and the business owner need you to focus on. That's huge.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to kind of incorporate a couple of things because you have a real estate investment layer of your personal business. So you can speak to not just business owners from just the traditional standpoint, but also real estate investors that are building out, a multifamily or some sort of syndication portfolio, right? There's a lot of different commercial groups out there. So with that, I want to take a step back because there's something we haven't talked about yet that you have the ability to help take. You mentioned like all this data, all this analysis, like, oh my gosh, it can be overwhelming.
Mhm.
Business owners and real estate investors alike have this commonality that they either need to present to investors, present to the board. There's some sort of reporting that needs to be done with all the data and the financials that are going on in the background. That has to be presented on a regular basis, whether it's annually, semi, quarter, whatever. But you have really stepped into this great way to say, hey, you can serve this role to say, give me all your data. Let's do this. Not only am I going to help you analyze the data, I'm going to put it in a beautiful client or board or investor facing beautiful packet makes it digestible in a pretty succinct packet. Can you talk about that? Because this is huge for business owners and investors, but also if you're a bookkeeper or a CPA that's helping your clients do this and it's a big pain in your butt and it's not in your ZOG, this is something that you need to be listening to because it's an excellent service ad for your clients.
Yeah, so I mean, we know there's a ton of technology tools out there, right, that can analyze the data and present it in certain ways. But
Oh yeah.
you get your reports out of QuickBooks, right? Let's say, for an example, and you get your P&L, and okay, it's fine, it gives you the data, but it doesn't necessarily come out in a way that is easily digestible, rolled up enough for investors or board members. And so, really taking all of that data through the financial reporting systems and putting them into ways that you can look at them from a visual perspective. So turning them into graphical representation of the data.
People
And
love pictures.
yeah,
People love that, right? That tells the
yeah,
story.
I mean, it makes it so much easier for the point to jump out at you,
Yeah.
as opposed to just seeing like a list of numbers. And, we can do comparisons, period over period, budget to actual, whatever is the right, report for the moment in time, whatever you're thinking. And, using that to help present to investors or board members, it not only creates an ease of understanding the data, but it makes you as the presenter look like you have it all together, right? Because you're presenting it in the way that is just very polished.
Hmm.
That to me is an extra layer of support that I can provide to clients. And I'm not like hand drawing these graphs, right? It is technology, and technology is constantly evolving, but there's a lot of ways to make it simpler and easier these days, to put it in the right structure.
Yeah, and I know there's people that have used like ChatGPT and Claude and all of that, and they're great analysis or thought partners, right? That's kind of the way we think about it. It's great to plug that in and kind of go through some ideas and analysis and kind of going to and fro on that. But to take all of it and put it into a presentable format that you don't have to go in and edit 100 times. Like you said, you're including the charts and graphs and the visuals that connect with the data, connect with the investor or the board to tell the full story. That's a specialty in and of itself, on top of the analysis. And I think if anybody's been in this world, you've listened to somebody present a deal, or I have several different LP investments that I'm in, and I have these syndicators that are doing updates, and they're talking about this project and that project. Some of them are great. I'm like, oh, I'm really excited about this deal. This is a great property. And the other one, I'm just like, why did I invest in this? This sucks.
It was a good idea. It was a great idea, but it didn't work.
No, a lot of times it's about the numbers. It really is.
Mhm.
But I would add that there's a level of presentation and clarity and the way that that information is communicated that
Mhm.
really makes people get excited about what you're doing or turn off their Zoom camera, right? They're on mute. So are you able to present this in a way that gets people excited, that gets them on board, and that helps them see where you're wanting to go? So you guys are like, yeah, let's do this together. And just, it's hard to take the time to put that together. So offering that, I just think is huge. Like I said, that's real estate investors, syndicators, and business owners. So that's a really, really unique overlap.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of coming back to the real estate investing and the business owner side, there's a lot of people are in growth mode. We're growing, we're trying to build a accumulation phase of life. So how should, when we're looking at the opportunity for growth and investing in business, how should business owners, be thinking about business growth and investing, compared to like balancing that with managing like the day-to-day operations and keeping the lights on, right? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah. So I think as a business owner, you need to spend a majority of your time on the future, right? If you're the one in the day-to-day, managing all of the intricate details, then you're probably not allocating your time in the right way. Now, not to say that at the beginning, the business owner is doing everything, right?
Right.
Because it's before you get to hire people. But once you can hire your team, and once you have the right structure set up, your team really should be managing the day to day so that you can focus on that future future vision, and where you want to take the business, because that's really, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, that's where your strength is, right? You
Yeah.
had the idea to start this, so let's, keep those ideas flowing.
I love that. Yeah, and I think one of the books, Rocket Fuel, we've talked about that. The
Mhm.
visionary and the integrator,
Yeah.
being able to see where the business is going, and right, like you can't be a visionary if you're stuck in the minute details. So that rocket fuel, bringing the two different sides of that token, two different chemicals, I guess is the analogy he
Mhm.
uses in that book. It literally becomes explosive. So that's fantastic. So let's shift. I want to come back to something you mentioned at the beginning, is it's not just, you're not just sitting there like, calculating and spitting out numbers left and right. I think one of the bigger value adds that you bring to the table is that there's a level of accountability and leadership that you're implementing into the business owner's day-to-day life because they have somebody that you're not going to challenge them, but you're going to say, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Right. So there's a leadership component to what you're doing. So when you're talking about coming into someone's business, you mentioned that there's a judgment-free approach to what you're doing. Why is that so important?
Well, I think part of it is that people get worried bringing in a CFO because they don't want people to think that they made a bad decision in the past, right? And
Yeah.
so they may not bring in the right resources because they don't want you looking at what happened last year and the decisions they made and, looking at their books because, maybe they messed it all up.
Oh, yeah.
But that's really where the perspective that I come from is like, okay, all that is data, right? Like it might be emotional to the business owner because they, had to
Mm,
slog through it. But for me, it's just data. So let's take that data and let's use that data to make better decisions going forward.
that's huge.
There's somebody, and I can't remember who it is, that has that quote, like, if you know better, you can do better. And so that's the like
Ooh,
take the data, take the experience that you had, and let's, do something different and better next time.
that's huge. And I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, we all get emotional off of, oh, I did this, and it's easy to get wrapped up in, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And
Hmm.
so you're coming in and saying, hey, I don't have any emotional tie to that. We're going to look at the facts and analyze the details and actually make a pragmatic decision that's not emotionally tied to experiences. That's
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that 9 times out of 10, when you start to look at the data, you're like, well, it's actually not as bad as you might think that it is,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Yes. Give
Like
yourself a
something.
break.
Yes, exactly. And I have that conversation often with folks that I work with, and I'm looking at, I'm like, wait, so tell like what am I still missing? Because I'm not getting from the data what you're telling me from your emotion, right? It just
Yeah.
is not matching up. So it's you're not that bad off.
That's like
So
the people that Google their symptoms online and it's like,
right.
oh yeah, you have a tumor or whatever. And they go to the doctor, they're freaking out. The doctor's like, you're
Yeah,
fine. Here's
you've
an
got the flu.
antibiotic,
Yeah.
right? Like
I know what Googling is.
my sister is the worst at that. She's not a hypochondriac, but she'll use Dr. Google and I'm like, stop it, Cassie. You're gonna think you have some sort of like brain malfunction. But that's what we do in our business, right? Like we get so overwhelmed or we work stuff up or like we fixate on, like you and I have talked about this. Like I had that
Yeah.
property that went belly up. And so now I'm like when I'm looking at different investments and different opportunities, like I'm tied up emotionally in that deal. And that has really caused, I don't want to say problems, but it's created barriers that I've had to break through because so many of the deals and so many of the opportunities and things that I do now are filtered through the lens of the mistake that I made with
Yeah.
that investment. And so you've got to remove that barrier to look at the facts, not the feelings, and having somebody like you step in and do that. I mean, what a game changer.
Yeah. And I'm not saying don't learn from what
Yeah.
happened, right? Like don't ignore it, but take something from it, right? Like anytime and my husband and I have this conversation often, like is it a failure or is it a learning experience, right? Like did you learn something
Hmm.
from it? Because if you learn from it, then it's not a failure because you're better now than you were before.
And you know what FAIL stands for, right? First attempt in learning. So it's
Excellent.
one more step in the right direction. So I love that. Let's wrap up and kind of, I know we're kind of getting to the top of the hour, so I want to make sure that we get all the details in that we can. So let's talk about some tactical takeaways, some things that you can maybe leave behind and people can start to do a little bit of homework on their own. Again, you guys, I highly recommend that you are connecting with Cheryl and we're gonna, we've got a little free resource for you at the end later. So hold on, we're almost there. But Cheryl, what are the top maybe like 2 to 4 things, 2 to 4 metrics that every business owner should know about their business, no matter what? What do they need to go home and look at today?
Yep. So I would say your cash flow.
Mm,
So cash burn, like what are you spending each month is super important. And, obviously profit, right? Like that's the first thing that people usually go to. I love to look at growth numbers. So
Mm,
percentage growth of revenue or profit, like month over month, year over year. And the other thing is that each business is going to have their own particular metrics that are good for their industry, right?
yeah.
Like, if you work in, like, for example, my short-term rentals, right? We're looking at average daily rate and occupancy rate. I work with a lot of service-based businesses, and we're looking at utilization of the
Mm.
client-facing staff. So it really all depends on what kind of business it is for that, and like the ancillary metrics that I would recommend to look at.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it right on the head because it's easy to kind of come into this conversation and say, okay, what do I do? Right? Like one, two, three. But you nailed it right on the head. Yes, there's key things that are important to every business, but the most important thing you can do is look at your industry and the specific KPIs that matter and dig down into the details of that. Is there, whether entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, just people in general, people who are listening, if you look back on your experience and your lessons and all the different things that you've gone through, is there one piece of advice, whether that's personal advice, business advice, financial advice, what would it be? What would be something that you say, hey, this is a big lesson I should have learned a long time ago?
Yeah, I think it's really just looking at the data and making sure that you're not, when we've talked about this, not putting judgment against the data,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I think you can do a lot with that. As long as you have good, clean data and you use that for what it is.
Yeah, I love that. Just get down to the brass tacks, remove the emotion and focus on the details there.
Mhm.
Now, I want you guys, so like I promised, I know Cheryl has a freebie that she has worked so hard on. Tell us about your quiz. So I know a lot of people have questions and they want to kind of figure out like what makes sense, what doesn't. Tell us about your free quiz that you have available for these people.
Yeah, so I went through and put together a series of questions that will help you understand where you are in your financial management journey. And so, getting through that list of questions, you're going to, at the end of it, there will be a takeaway, a downloadable that will give you some steps that you could take to
Oh,
improve to the next level. And there's even some spreadsheets that could help, some templates that you could work with, and hopefully it just helps you understand where you are and what it takes to improve just one step. So yeah, so I'm really excited about that.
that's huge, y'all. Like you're able to go take this quiz, input your own information, and then get free downloadable templates, resources, and even some tactical steps from an actual fractional CFO. I mean, if you don't take advantage of that, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. And the last thing I'll say is you are also one more value add that you're bringing into the business world is something that very, very few business owners think about. You've talked about the growth, you've talked about the accumulation, you've even talked about the startup phase. There's the back end to this.
Mhm.
Businesses at some point, right? We can't work forever. Like, regardless of what we think, there's no Superman syndrome that lasts forever. At some point, you're going to want to exit your business. So, what have you done and what are you stepping into that role? How are you helping business owners look at the next chapter of their life?
Yeah, so this is something that I've spent, a long time. Like I had in my background before I was working on my own, did a lot of mergers and acquisitions work. And so it just felt right to kind of bring that into my fractional CFO practice as I work with businesses that are going on, 20, 30 years in business,
Wow.
thinking about that exit process. And so there's a designation certified exit planning advisor. So I now have that designation.
Yay.
And one of the key things that we learned as we're going through that certification process is you don't have to be ready to exit your business right now to
Mm,
start thinking about these activities, right? So, exit planning is just good business planning. And
yeah.
if you start thinking about it now, it will help you run your business better, even if you're not thinking of exiting in the next 3 to 5 years. But on the other hand, if you don't think about this, you can't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm ready to sell my business," because your
Well,
business,
you can, but it's not going to work out too good.
right, you're not going to get the price that you're looking to get. And so that definitely is a 3 to 5 year process, right? You
Yeah.
need to put the infrastructure in place. You need to make sure you have the right data. You need to make sure that your business is ready to be sold. And then even when you get all of that, it takes, a year or two maybe to find the right buyer.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it really is a process, and really thinking about that on a regular basis just helps you improve the business operations generally.
Well, I think that's a good point too, is, whether you want to sell your business or not, if you were to sell your business, the higher value that you get, that means the more efficient and effective your business is. So having somebody come in, identify the metrics that would make your business more valuable, regardless of whether or not you sell it for that value, it's still going to be operating at more efficiency. So why not? And you're right. I think this is a great service to provide. Is you come from the fractional CFO world, accounting, y'all, like she's a CPA, so she has the accounting background. She's got a variety of designations and experiences and different, types of industries to be able to say, hey, this is what I've seen big picture. Here's how we can apply it to your specific business, not just the business, but the actual value that you're getting out of it from, a value standpoint. So if, again, I don't know what else to tell you. There's a lot going on here. So make sure you're reaching out to Cheryl. Make sure you're connecting with her. And with that being said, Cheryl, how do you want to talk to people? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I think follow me on LinkedIn is great. I try and put out some good content a couple of times a week there. And then really my website, so pillar1consulting.com is the best way to reach out.
I love that. Cheryl, this has been so valuable. Every time I hear you talk, I learn something new. I think, again, like we've talked about different lenses to think about your business and your finances through. So, business owners who are ready to stop guessing and they're ready to start leading their company and their finances with confidence. Y'all, this is the right route. Make sure you take that quiz. We're going to have the link in the comments, in the email, all the different places. We're going to have this link available so you can take the free quiz, get your templates, get your tactical guide, and then, like I said, reach out to Cheryl, get connected with her, and see what your next steps really need to be and see how you can take you and your business to the next level. So, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on. This has been incredibly helpful.
Yes, this was wonderful. Thank you, Erica.
Awesome, y'all. So again, make sure if you haven't already, why not hit the subscribe bell, hit that, right? We've got really awesome people on here. These are real people making real money, so you can too. So make sure you hit the subscribe and the notification bell so that you can hear about all the different interviews and topics we have coming up. And until next time, keep it real. At Infinity Investment Strategies, we teach investors and business owners how to become the bank. In using the infinite banking strategy, you can lower your taxes, increase the control you have over your own money, lower your risk against multiple wealth eroding factors by adding additional layers of asset protection, and increase your leverage with guaranteed growth and the opportunity for dual rates of return. With authorized infinite banking practitioners with experience in business and investments, we are here to help enhance your portfolio.